The brooms are indeed out by the Riverwalk all throughout San Antonio tonight. So, what's good, realists? What is up, everybody on the Real Sports Talk? What's good in sports on the internet and in life? My name is Akeem Balaam, recapping Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals, and it has resulted in a familiar scene that we have seen over these past 15 years or so. Another NBA Finals trip for the San Antonio Spurs as they have defeated the Memphis Grizzlies in Game 4 Western Conference Finals. Final score 93-86. And before I, of course, get to Tony Parker, who, of course, led the charge all throughout this game for the San Antonio Spurs with 37.6 assists, wound up averaging 24.5 points throughout the series. I'm just going to go ahead and just give you just a recap of just pretty much how this game went out for the most part. It started out 24-14 at the end of the first quarter. You know, San Antonio was playing a lot of lockdown defense, which really has been one of the things that this team under Greg Popovich has been known for over the past 15 or so plus years, ever since they started their winning ways back in 1999 when they won their first championship. It was really emblematic of how good that they've been over these past few years. And also the Memphis Grizzlies, that defense from the Spurs really held the Grizzlies down. In the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken, they went 6 of 21 shooting from the field. Come again, 6 of 21 shooting from the field. If they continue that throughout the rest of that game, they probably would have been blown out the same way that they were blown out in Game 1. So it was indeed 24-14 at the end of one quarter. But the Memphis Grizzlies, Lionel Hollins, were able to make some adjustments. They did. They were able to claw themselves back into this game, and they were actually able to make this rather interesting. They were able to cut down at one point what was a San Antonio Spurs 12-point lead all the way down to as little, if I'm not mistaken, to as little as 3 points. And they especially started getting at least some production from Zach Randolph, who really had a tough time of it in that first half, but he started picking it up a little bit in the second half at least. And everybody was talking about his free throw struggles and also his struggles from shooting from the field. He had a very rough series, did Zach Randolph. But the Memphis Grizzlies, at least, they did not, they were not one of these teams that were intimidated. A lot of teams, when they're in this position, they wind up just falling up their tents and going home. But the Memphis Grizzlies, they are not known for that. Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol, Quincy Pondexter, they kept on clawing, they kept on fighting, and they actually made a pretty good game of it. It was actually very, very, very competitive, despite San Antonio going on some runs, getting some rather sizable leads. Memphis was with them throughout this game, but as I was saying earlier, too much Tony Parker, 37 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. He really led San Antonio throughout this game for the most part. So that's how the San Antonio Spurs won this one. Once again, final score 93-86, completing a 4-game sweep of the Memphis Grizzlies, and they are your Western Conference champions, are the San Antonio Spurs. Once again, going back to the NBA Finals, they shall now await who is the winner of the Miami Heat and the Indiana Pacers series. And a lot of it's actually rather, if it's going to be the Miami Heat, it's actually rather imperative now for the Miami Heat to close out that series with the Indiana Pacers as soon as they possibly can, because now the San Antonio Spurs are going to be well rested. They are not going to have to play basketball once again until June 6th, which is when the NBA Finals commence. So it's actually rather imperative now that the Spurs have closed out this series. It's imperative for the Miami Heat, if it indeed is going to be them that faces the Spurs in the NBA Finals. It's imperative that they get this series, this Eastern Conference Finals, done with the Indiana Pacers as quick as possible, because the San Antonio Spurs are going to be well rested, and they're the kind of team that needs that kind of rest. So if the Miami Heat are going to have, it's going to be, if it is San Antonio and Miami, it's going to be a rather pretty good series, regardless, to see LeBron, Wade, Bosh go up against Parker and Duncan and Ginobili. But you think that now with everything going on, it's imperative that the Heat close out that series with the Pacers. But we'll talk about that some other time. What is to talk about tonight is the fact that the San Antonio Spurs, once again, they just keep on doing it. It seems like after they won that championship in 2007, everybody wrote them off. That championship in 2007 was the last time that they were going to win a championship, and they were not going to compete. The Lakers were going to pass them by. Some other teams were going to pass them by. The Oklahoma City Thunder was supposed to pass them by, and it didn't turn out that way. It turned out that way for a little bit, but not this year. They're once again back in a familiar place, competing once again for an NBA championship. Just going down the stat sheet, of course, I mentioned Parker with 37. Also, Tim Duncan with 15, 8 rebounds, 4 block shots. Also, Kawhi Leonard with 11 points as well. Also, they actually got some pretty good production from Thiago Splitter, who had 9 points, 4 block shots as well in the San Antonio Spurs winning effort. On the Memphis Grizzlies side, Quincy Pondexter, 22 points for him, in addition to 3 of 6 made from three-point range. Also, Marc Gasol with 14. Zach Randolph, again, he had 13 points, wound up being third in scoring for the Memphis Grizzlies. But really, one of the reasons when we look back at this series we're going to look back at this series as to why the Memphis Grizzlies struggled, not only because they were a young team that was pretty much getting themselves acquainted, with the pressures of playing in a Western Conference Finals against such an experienced team like the San Antonio Spurs. Not only that they were really, I wouldn't say that they were overwhelmed with the challenge, because Memphis really showed a lot of heart, as they call it in Memphis, a lot of grit and grind, as they call it at the Grindhouse. But really, the Grizzlies were just getting themselves acquainted with really competing at this level, in this stage, against an experienced team that knows a little something about competing for championships. So Memphis really has nothing to be ashamed about in this series. But when we look back at this series, is one of the reasons why the Memphis Grizzlies got swept for zip. Zach Randolph really had a tough time going up against Tim Duncan in this series. So that's your Western Conference Finals. Once again, the Spurs are back in the NBA Finals. 93-86 victory over the Memphis Grizzlies. Once again, congrats to the Grizzlies for a great season. Actually, their first trip ever to the Western Conference Finals. But to the victor belong the spoils, and the spoils go to San Antonio, who will be playing in the NBA Finals against either Indiana or Miami. So that's your recap for the Real Sports Talk Network. Once again, thanks everybody for, of course, keeping up with everything that we got going on. Thanks once again to Tim and Justin and Emily and everybody else behind the scenes. Can the Spurs win the NBA championship? Even at this stage, a lot of the careers of Parker and Ginobili and Duncan, can the Spurs win the NBA championship, do you think? They certainly look like championship contenders. Obviously, they're championship contenders because they're in the NBA Finals, but can they beat either Indiana or Miami? Can they get it done once again, as they already have 4 previous occasions in the Greg Popovich, Tim Duncan era? So once again, thanks once again for everybody for checking out our videos, and let's enjoy the NBA Finals. The San Antonio Spurs are going to be in it. Who's going to join them? So rate, comment, react, reply, add, subscribe. Look forward to reading your comments as always, because we're just a bunch of dudes here and a few gals talking sports here on the Real Sports Talk. So once again, for everybody behind the scenes, thanks everybody. Congrats to the San Antonio Spurs. I'll check yous at another time. For Akeem Balaam, Tim Kelly, Justin Godsey, everybody here, see y'all on the internet someplace.